at some point, you got to be very honest with yourself, at least, about what could be fatal to your business. And it could be the changes of the world. It could be the water pipe bursting. It could be a hurricane. I guess where I'm going with this is it sort of confirms the fact that it's really the same as every other industry. Like once a quarter or so, you should probably have a conversation with yourself. Maybe it's a Google spreadsheet or something. It doesn't have to look pretty. And it's a disaster planning scenario, and it's everything that could possibly happen. Kick it.
Welcome to Strata Stories. My name is Thomas Schreiber, and I'm Director of Marketing here at Strata. Strata is a single EMR platform and revenue cycle management service for physical, occupational, and speech therapy practices that helps you achieve a 99.99% reimbursement rate. On today's episode, Paul Singh, the CEO of Strata, talks with Ben Galin, PT, and the owner of Evolution Rehab Group. Paul and Ben talk through the Change Healthcare cyber attack, as well as the decision StrataPT made to move clinics to different clearinghouses, how you as a clinic owner need to think about risk moving forward, including a tactical guide to mitigating risk, and the importance of having cash reserves during times like these. If you'd like to learn more about Strata and see how our EMR and RCM works, head over to StrataPT.com to book a demo. Now, without further delay, here's today's episode.
The outage happened on a Tuesday or Wednesday of that week, whenever it did happen. And, and I can corroborate this with screenshots of my calendar and stuff like that. But I pulled the leadership team together on Friday, I believe at like 1 p.m. Eastern time. And, my background is data centers and infrastructure. That's actually like what I have been doing for 20 years. I own a bunch of data centers and, that sort of thing. So anyway, the point is, though, is that during that 40-ish minute meeting that day, basically I said to the team, like, look, if a little company like us has hot spares and the ability to self-heal our infrastructure within minutes, just to paraphrase that 40-minute call, I was like, look, if we already have contingencies in place that never allow us to be down for more than a few minutes, and yet somebody large like Change has been down for days, this is much larger than a DDoS or anything else that could have happened. And so the long and short of it is that by the end of the call, we kind of made a decision as a team that we would give it 2 more days, through the weekend, to see what would happen, and that we would then put a plan in motion on that Monday. And that's, it wasn't very glamorous, but that's kind of the gist of it. It was kind of like, it really came down to like not really a bet. It was just kind of coming from the tech world. It's like, man, we measure our downtime in minutes per month, like seconds per month. That's how we measure it. And so when a big player like Change is down for hours and hours, I mean, my leadership team should probably hold me accountable if my judgment or if my memory is incorrect. But, one of the things I said to the team was like, look, guys, I don't think we should pay attention to what they are saying. We should be reading in between the lines to what they are not saying. Yeah. And what they are not saying at that time was when the system would come back on, exactly what had happened, anything like that. And obviously over time, everybody found out that makes sense. When you're being held ransom or when your data is being held ransom, you can't. But anyway, I appreciate that comment. It's one of those things where, so once we got that ball rolling that following week, the team sort of rallied. It's been tough. I mean, I think the entire team at Strata has just been sort of spread a lot thinner than usual, just trying to figure it all out, chase down clients. We need signatures and stuff before we can make moves and things like that. But, not to date this particular recording, but as of the time of this recording, I think we're just about complete with every fix that we can put in place for the vast majority of clients. And now I think the only thing left is the small handful of payers that are only accessible through Change. So, I think,
again, if I, just like you though, if I had to bet on someone who's not going to have downtime, I'd put my money on Change and Waste. The two of them, like I wouldn't even have contingent. Like if I had tabletop exercises of contingencies, like they're not the ones that I'm building contingencies on.
Yeah.
I'd be more concerned about your data center of AWS in Northern Virginia going down temporarily. Like that has a higher likelihood than what happened to change.
It's funny you say that. We actually have a spreadsheet internally. There is a spreadsheet at the leadership level of every possible thing that could go wrong. And this, I think this was on the list, like, major provider going down, but it was classified as a very low probability. you know, we,
And it should be. It should be a
right.
very low probability.
Yeah. Yeah. Like,
Shame on, someone's getting fired of it. I mean, shame on. Granted, also just brings to light that nothing is as secure. Unless you have like an air-gapped computer, nothing is as secure as people want to say it is, or make you believe. I mean, was Equifax 2 years ago that had the you're talking about someone who contains the most sensitive information of the entire U.S. public gets breached, change gets breached. Like at this point, who out there thinks that there isn't something that's going to now think that there is any such thing as a secure data set? I mean, some kid was stealing from the Pentagon, and was that the fall or the summer? It's like at this point, I think it's kind of like just the assumption that your data is somewhere and someone has it, and just a matter of how much they want to exploit you for it, or what. But the contingencies on, like, oh my gosh, with a data breach, I think like the cat's out of the bag. I mean, I don't know how much more big data breaches we not need to have, where the government needs to go. This is just a way of life.
well, that's, and I might be getting a little bit too high level here, and hopefully we don't lose any listeners on this one. But one of the things that is really, really fascinating to me, again, coming as an outsider to this industry, is how little interchangeability there is between the platforms. So let me just kind of set this up and kind of see what your thoughts are. Here at my home, for example, I can now choose in 2024, I can choose to get internet from Verizon Fios, Comcast cable, Starlink, I can use my AT&T hotspot, and it's as simple, for the most part, as simple as me just hitting that little icon at the top of my computer and picking a different Wi-Fi network, or whatever. Like the point is like I can choose. There's multiple routes, and I think the telecom industry, because the government a long time ago classified telecom and communications as like a basic right. I forget the legal term, but they basically classified that as a legal right. It forced interoperability and changeability and frankly, some competition. And ultimately it netted out as more communications ability for the average consumer. Now, contrast that to where we are as an industry. You and your practice essentially have to pick what payers you're going to accept. If you're going to go down that route, you're going to pick an interchange, or you're going to pick essentially between Change and Waystar, or maybe two or three other players. But basically, you're going to pick between one of five, and then you're signed onto that platform. And if you want to move, it's not very simple. It's, you're not only is it a bunch of paperwork, but in some cases there are certain payers that are just only available through certain. And I guess where I'm going with this is like, I hope one of the outcomes, and this is what I want to get your opinion on. I hope that one of the outcomes of this is not only, hey, what happened to the data breach, whose records were accessed and all that, but I hope the other side of this also is um, why wasn't there more interoperability built into the system? Why is it, for example, that TRICARE, as an example, is only accessible through Change? I mean, come on, that's not a small network, right? You're telling me that the other four major players in the industry and the other 30 something, I mean, there's a million interchanges, right? You're telling me that none of the other ones wanted to connect to TRICARE?
I don't know if this is just the archaicness of the system, like literally the system's like pathways are just so old, like, or what. But I mean, it's not only is it interoperable, but I assume you know this. I can't say that my practice, want to be on Change today, but simultaneously be on Waystar for another project we're doing, let's say. Or I, as an individual, again, I can't get my ERAs. I can get payment being on. I could submit claims on multiple gateways. I can't receive remittance back from multiple gateways, and that sounds like who the hell cares? But I'm telling you, I've done plenty of projects and wearing different hats where a doc is working full time regular practice, but then wants just this virtual part of the thing, or something on the side that they're doing coming back through a different EHR, but then that EHR is attached to a different clearinghouse, and that's not, to tell them, like, no one knows this stuff. No one knows that, by the way, you can't receive electronic remittance from two clearinghouses simultaneously under one NPI, essentially. Like, it's regardless whether you use the same EMR or not, like that, that's not even a choice. So to go back to then saying, like, why is it interoperable? My guess is there's something going on at the real, like, 833, whatever file that is. Like, there's something going on here on just the archaicness of or is it 837? Whatever. There's something going on at the archaic level of this program that stops. My guess is that's what stops the interoperability of our pipe dream of how it should occur.
Well, not again. I don't want to bore people with too much technicality here, but the thing is, though, is that the limitation is not technical. The limitation is the business rules. This is a combination of, okay, so this is might get me in trouble. I'm not accusing anybody of collusion or anything like that, but it's not in anybody's best interest. If you're one of the big players, it's not in anybody's best interest to actually enable the functionality. But this is not a technical limitation.
It doesn't seem like it should be.
No, ultimately, like, an ERA coming back has a unique identifier.
Correct.
And you're telling me that, like, if you send that ERA across 5 platforms, you can't just say?
Right.
Yeah.
I should be able to submit through 5 clearinghouses simultaneously and get back remittance on each one simultaneously. Technologically, it doesn't seem plausible that can't occur.
But, people, okay, so again, I'm going real inside baseball, but hopefully, like, people listening to this kind of understand that, like, this isn't just my opinion. This is how the internet works. I mean, for 50 years of the internet, the entire internet is built around this idea that a packet should be able to go through multiple routes to get to the same place. And, like, if we were to be super nerdy right now and, like, turn on a packet viewer to watch the packets going between you and me during this recording, what we would find is that hundreds of thousands, if not millions of bits per second are going back and forth between your computer and my computer. To you and me, we perceive our conversation as having no gaps, no delay, no unnecessary repetition. But behind the scenes, all the hardware of the internet and even my own computer and your computer are throwing away the excesses, because, like, that pixel that represents your eyeball right now probably came to my computer through 8 different routes. And my computer in real time said, I got the first one. I don't need the other 7. So, like, I'm not making this up. When you send an ERA, it's not like somebody that really thinks that ERAs can only come through $1 billion, multi-billion-dollar company, when the internet can operate, pretty well for 50 years based on, anyway, this is crazy. This is just, I'm not, accusing anybody of collusion or anything like that, but this is a solved problem. It's been solved in many other industries for 50 years. And like, sorry, one other thing, just because I'm on this topic and it's been burning me up for a month now with change. The same is true of banking. If you and I
was
bank,
going to bring that up, but I'm like, nah, that's a whole other conversation.
It's all the same. No, well, it's kind of the same principle, though, right? Bank of America goes down, or I don't like Bank of America. I mean, putting aside, like, a run on the banks, you and I can walk over there right now and do a wire transfer to Wells Fargo or to Navy Federal or whatever, and we can have 2 accounts. I can say, hey, Ben, you can, wire me at this one or that one. Or I can say, hey, Ben, just write me a check, and I can walk the check to both. Like, we're not talking about, innovation here in healthcare. We're just talking about doing a similar set of things as other industries. And I hope that one of the outcomes of this entire change debacle is some sort of political oversight, which, look, I'm a capitalist. I am a capitalist through and through. But there is a reason, like, governments probably should, in my opinion, governments should not be involved in every small detail. But when you're talking about big platforms that in this case represent 1 in 3 patients in the country and tens of thousands, if not millions, of medical professionals as well. Come on, like there's got to be somebody overseeing this to make sure that the decisions being made at the business level are in the best interests of the entire population, not
even the outcome of
five
it. I mean,
players.
even the outcome of it, you think the government would. So I mean, they paid the ransom, but did they go through the steps to ensure that the files were destroyed in receiving that ransom? Like, you'd think that the government at that point would be like, man, this is a pretty large, one of the largest breaches in history. I mean, it really is.
It probably is. Yeah.
Like I said, I named a couple. You'd think that the government would have stepped in once they knew this was going on, which they knew that there was ransomware being held at this point. Like, maybe the government gets involved and says, hey, we just want to make sure that at the end of this, you've done full, as protected as you can get, because like I will get a fine from the government does step in to say, here's my fine if I have a breach and I don't notify my public within a certain amount of time. If I have a breach and I don't notify if certain things were in that breach of people in a certain, like I know what my fines are, the government steps in. So they have more than enough clout to step in and fine me as an entity who's
Right.
using these other third party with BAAs in place. But you think that the government would have stepped in and said, hey, change, like this is so sensitive what's going on now. We're going to make sure that when you resolve this to a liking that we have. But to your point, I haven't heard anything about the fallout of this, like at all. Like not even hey, the Senate Finance Committee is bringing them in to talk. Like nothing.
Yeah. I think, and somebody that's more up to date on their HIPAA training will correct me on this, but I think technically they have up to 60. I mean, I think they're supposed to notify the affected parties
They have
as soon as possible, but
yeah.
I think the language is kind of interpreted as by the 60-day mark.
Yeah.
So
and I think in different states have different rules too. I think, like for example, Texas,
right.
I think are harder on it.
But yeah, I mean, man, it'll be interesting to see if like some political committee, some congressional committee actually, marches those execs down the office, down the hallway and says, sit down and tell us exactly what happened while the cameras run.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be fascinating.
Did pay the ransom, what did you do to make sure that there wasn't, that you couldn't just have to pay ransom every week, that this data isn't still out there, that it hasn't been shared with 800 other people?
That's right. Yeah. And because, okay, so now I know we're already way past inside baseball, but you and I are both operating on what's publicly available, which is obviously not the full set of information. But when you think about like reading between the lines of how we made a decision to move forward and stuff like that, the other thing to look at also is what things they did leak or that somebody leaked. And one of the things that somebody leaked or around this was that some obscure so the big language that was being used was like, oh, this is a nation state actor and and all that. Well, it's like, hey, if it's a nation state, then the government really should get involved. Okay, what happened there? But then the other thing that started to get kind of leaked was that this was an exploit of a very obscure
like single person
piece of software, essentially. Like the actual vector that was used to enter the system was sort of displayed or hinted as like, oh, we forgot to do an update on this one software package and that's how they got in or whatever. And it's like, well, come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
Like
a little fishy. I mean, how many security people they have working at that company? I got to imagine it's in the dozens, not in the ones or twos.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So I don't know. It's we'll just kind of see where this thing kind of lands. But on the flip side, it's like, it's all the practices that sort of were in the crosshairs. Like they're the ones that got hurt.
I mean, there's hospitals and they close over this. Like literally, we just couldn't fund the hospital because of we've talked about cash flow. Couldn't get choked off from they're almost payroll to payroll, I should say. You choke them off for one payroll, maybe they survive that. You choke them off two payrolls. I mean, are they getting a line of credit tomorrow for $800,000 above their extended line of credit already?
Oh, well, I mean, you're gonna get people started on like that loan offering that Change brought in, right?
So bad PR. Bad PR. Someone made a bad move there.
Oh, well, I think like I'm an optimist, so let's assume that everybody was operating, in the best way they could and all that. Like somewhere somebody at Change was like, we're going to create an algorithm that programmatically figures out what you're authorized to get and then never back tested or smoke tested the algorithm And next thing you know, people on Twitter are lighting it up. They're like, hey, I do $50,000 a week in claims and the system gave me a $20 loan. Like,
Yeah.
come on, who makes that
Yeah, no,
mistake?
like I said, that move, the concept of the move, like you said, good for them. They have enough money in their coffers to just go, we will essentially front you whatever your claims are, we'll front you that. Maybe 80%, 90%, something, or 100%. They screwed up. Give them 100% of
Yeah. Well,
claims.
is there proof they did that though? I don't know that I've seen. I wish somebody would like post pictures on Twitter or LinkedIn of the checks or the wire transfers coming in.
I think from what to your point, I only saw it on social media, and from what I've seen or read, it seems like the amounts were so insulting.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
egregious that I don't think people even took them up on it. I think, but to your point, did someone take them up on it, and did someone get a check? And then what are the hoops they've got to jump through to get back that money? Is change charging them interest? Like there's some PR stuff here where if they don't handle that part well,
oh boy,
what a double nightmare.
Yeah. So I know. I hope this is okay. We're talking about this, but I'm curious of your thoughts on. So like, what do you think? So there's obviously some of the stuff we've talked about is above our pay grade, right? Like getting government involved, like that's just above our pay grade. I think it should happen, but it's, two dudes on the internet right now. I don't know that we can make that happen today, but
that's a good name for a podcast, by the way.
Yeah, right. Two dudes on the internet. But I'm curious about your thoughts, like, on the practice side of things, what, okay. So I don't know how to frame this question. So let me throw it out there and see what you say. For you in your practice, how do you mitigate against this in the future? Like, obviously like we don't control change and you don't control change and this could happen to Waystar or somebody else. But what, as you think about moving forward, what are you doing to kind of mitigate?
So part of the interesting thing of my specific license of a practice, certified rehab agency, part of what it makes you do, which my real sentiment is it's a waste of time and a waste of everything, but maybe there's a silver lining here, is you do have to do these tabletop exercises every quarter, disaster planning and stuff like that, and you run out of like, I'm in Florida, I'm in Southeast Florida, so number one is we did a hurricane tabletop exercise. I think number two is we did a hurricane. I think number three we did hurricane, but then I'm like, when this gets audited, I got to have more than a hurricane. So we did flooding, which really goes with hurricane. But at some point, if you've been in business long enough and every quarter you have to do this tabletop exercise, you start looking at other stuff. You start looking at shooters, you start looking at different stuff. One of the things that COVID forced me to look at is a choke off of revenue, because, we weren't billing for people anymore. And then it was just a choke off of revenue where, dude, I want to take the step of paying my employees still, before they even said that they were going to be doing like employee, you can apply to the government for some bailout loans and everything. So part of, I think, COVID and tabletop exercises silver lining was I really started thinking about how much money do I feel comfortable having in the bank at any given time, and how long is that runway for me today compared to pre-COVID. It's a lot longer. Where pre-COVID, if someone's like, hey, like I've got an ability right now to go expand. Like there's a thing on the table right now where probably after this call, that's why I was late. I was running some spreadsheets. I'm probably going to take initiative to move on something, knowing that it's going to drain the bank to do so. In the past, if I had two paychecks, if I had two payrolls in a month of rent in the bank, I was okay. I was happy. All was well. Like I wasn't going to get nervous. I would say right now I'm more at like a 4 month to 6 month minimum of wanting to have. I want to know I have enough cash to cover payroll, rent, fixed overhead, even some non-fixed overhead in case. I wasn't even thinking about change as much as like I've had other software in the past and I've other billing companies in the past where stuff like. With my specific, or you may not know, but my specific thing is I don't get paid directly by CMS too often. I get paid through a third party who's a middleman contractor of CMS on a value-based program. Every year, inevitably, they have to retie themselves to Medicare and they get choked off for 6 to 8 weeks. It's like, I didn't know that would happen the first year. They didn't either. And I got choked off for like 6 weeks. So like at some point, I'm like, well, I can't live the stress of going to go find a line of credit or borrowing from one place to pay this or a different business to pay this. especially with, we've talked about this before, I don't know if we've talked about it on video, but we've talked about it, getting a line of credit today compared to 2008, 2009, 2007. I mean, those days I was literally just getting like, do you want $2 million line of credit based on your credit score, based on the fact that you've been in business for 5 years? Like, here you go. And it was kind of like, that's crazy. Now, I had a CPA who, love him to death, he has passed away, but he was crazy. And he would take all of that, and he would take every credit card, he would take everything that would give him a line of credit, and because this was at near 0%. And he would then go buy something stupid like that was giving him a 3% return or 4% return. I'm not talking 20% return, 60. Like, hey, I could do this and I could go do this. But then he started saying, I could also go buy property and rent it out and have this thing. Like, he had a portfolio of all these lines of credits, and he was using them to continually make money off of their money. It's like, really, that's how the very wealthy work. Like, brilliant that this guy's got. He had the baseball card where you open up the sleeves and they got he had it with credit cards in it, with each credit card's line of credit. And on the credit card had a sticky note of the date he got the credit card, the date he opened up line of credit, how much line of credit, when it's due. And then usually, going back in that day, he would call and go, hey, this is coming due next month. We extended for another 6 months. And they would be happy. Yeah, great. We'll extend another 6 months. But those days are over. To get a line of credit today, I've had my corp in business for 21 years. I've had one of my corps in business for 21 years, and has revenue, does my tax returns, profitable, good credit. It actually has good credit. I don't think I can get a line of credit for under 12% today. And I don't think I could get even more than 250,000 at 12% without a real fight to get that. Like,
there'd have to be some collateral or something.
Yeah, exactly. I'd have to be like, so to your question, how comfortable am I, or how much time do I give? I'm up closer to about a 6 month, 3 to 6 months, depending on, like, right now I'm closer to 6 months on an outlook. But if I make this transaction, it'll knock me down to about 3 months, which at 3 months actually makes me a little nervous. Where 5 years ago, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, and I was sleeping fine. Because I knew money was easy to come to if I had to get it. As long as I knew that my accrual-based accounting looked good, I was okay to go get a line of credit. But now I don't even run my accrual account. I mean, I run it for my accountant because he likes to see certain things, but I really don't run my accrual numbers at all. Like, I am a cash-based accounting philosophy at this point because I don't know that money is easy to get by.
Well, yeah. I mean, just given the typical delay or delay between when you build the service and when you actually get paid, you're better off with a cash-based system anyway.
Yeah. What do you hear for people? Like, how are you hearing in this industry? Are you hearing how much people try to keep on? Are you hearing?
Okay, so
what I just gave you.
Yeah, I'm going to give you some broad strokes here real quick. So, this is anecdotal, but I'm sure I should probably create a poll on this. Okay, broadly speaking, practice owners fall into two buckets. And I would say bucket number one that I'll explain is probably like 95% of them. And then bucket number two is 5%. So let me start with the easy part. The 5% bucket is guys like you that are thinking much longer. Now, I think at 6 months of runway, so that's what I, typically on the investing side, I think about it as a runway. When you talk about you want to be 4 to 6 months of runway in the bank, you're on the high side, which I think is actually probably good where we are right now. But everybody else that's in that, the other 5% of people that are in that bucket as well, I think are mostly in the 2 to 3 month range. And the thing is, this is normal operating procedure for them over the last couple of years because they've gotten used to the idea of like, okay, deductibles reset in January. I got to think about that. Or depending on where they're at, they got to think about hurricane season, or they got to think about snowbirds and, visit counts changing. So the 5% of people that I talk to, or practice owners that I talk to, are in that bucket where they're way beyond, paycheck to paycheck, and they're thinking out 6 to 12 months into the future and then basing their cash plans around that. The other 95% of practice owners, and I'm going to say this in the most positive light, disclaimer, these are all good people. but they're really just paycheck to paycheck. I think they can survive for one pay period if something went sideways, but absolutely not for two. They don't fully understand the timelines. They don't fully understand, like if you ask them what's the difference between a balance sheet and a P&L, it's like,
Yeah, I mean, even just the
um,
luxury of deciding, let's just say there's a capital equipment you want, a capital expense. The luxury of deciding, do I want to take that all at once and depreciate it a certain way, or do I want to go through their financing? Well, again, 5-6 years ago, their financing was probably close to 0%. I would take their financing every day. Today, some stuff I'm seeing, their financing is not zero because they're not getting 0% money. So their financing, you start doing the math, like, holy cow, I'm paying for this thing twice over in 4 years based on
yeah,
like the interest. So wouldn't it be nice to know I have enough capital to decide for myself, do I want to rent or do I want to buy? I want to know, do I have enough capital that, like, if I was content going, I would never go on a hiring spree. I would never expand space. I would never go buy another opportunity that presents itself, or merge or acquire. Then I do think somewhere, like I said, I'll probably be down to 3 months after this and comfortable, still comfortable with that, but slowly build it
yep,
back up. But I
yep,
think at like 2 or 3 months, if that's where you're at, I think it grossly limits. It doesn't limit I think your risk is limited as far as like if you got choked, if change went down and you guys couldn't convert and Waystar also went down. I think it protects 99% of the use case of that. I don't think someone would be 2 months without payment. Like
yeah,
it
yeah,
could happen. Who that knows?
I,
But I
yeah,
think I think at 2 or 3 months, you're limiting your ability to do strategic moves.
yeah. Um, I'll add one other thing here, and you didn't ask this, but I'll just throw it out there in case it jogs any ideas or discussion points. For my own businesses, in terms of the businesses that I've started and operate and that still run these days, for my own businesses, we operate with 1 year of full expenses in cash in the bank at all times. So basically, and then it's rebalanced every month. So every month we know what the payroll is. We just, this is just basic math. The CPAs can tell you exactly how we do it, but we look at what the overall burn was for the month, which is overall expenses in terms of headcount, vendors, whatever. Just multiply it by 12, make sure the cash accounts have it. Now, we don't just keep it in a checking account. It's actually held in a money market account and stuff like that. But the point is, though, is that like, that's probably not the most tax optimized way to think about it. But for me as a business owner, you know, um, uh, almost 2 decades ago, I realized that this is probably not PG language, but I just found, actually, let me try to make it PG. I just found that for me as an operator of business, the sooner I got away from worrying about short to medium term bumps, the better I was able to start to think bigger. And
Amen.
ultimately, the
Amen.
biggest change that for me as an operator, and you're nodding, so maybe you agree with this, is that like once I, somehow learned that money is a tool that can be leveraged, that was when my eyes really opened up. Because to your point, like I also I'm 43 now, but like when I was first starting out, I was operating on these invisible scripts in my head that my parents and my friends taught me, which is like, oh, why would you have a loan? Why, like you were taught in absolutes about money, right? Like, and but then you start to wonder, like, why do the ultra wealthy carry debt? Why do the ultra wealthy do X or Y or whatever? And once you get past like thinking about car loans and all that stuff, and you start to realize, like, yeah, obviously money pays the bills. I get that. But like once you like pause, step back and realize like there is a reason why you might want to depreciate that $1,000 printer as opposed to, I don't know, leasing it. I mean, there's reasons for those different terms to exist. Once you realize that, you can start to kind of leverage it. And I just think that but 95% of, and this is anecdotal, but 95% of the practice owners I meet are still thinking like, how do I make ends meet? How do I do this? And I get that you have to do that. But when you meet these practice owners that have been doing this for years like this, I'm like, gosh,
But
that's a
but
tough way
to
to do this.
to that point, I think you have two buckets again. I think, and I've someone on there's a conversation going on as we speak on LinkedIn about this on someone's thing. I think there's two bucket owners. Well, there's three. So there's mega corporation physical therapy. So let's just strip that out. Let's not talk about them right now. But then there's two other buckets, which is, do I want to run like a lean, mean operating machine, and I'm just going to make myself a pretty good paycheck? I'm not going to have to listen to another owner. I will decide my fate. I will decide my hours. I will take my vacation. Like, I'm my boss. And maybe I got a little busy and I got a little bit, so I hired a second therapist or a part-time therapist or PTA, and like, great, maybe things are moving along a little bit, and I hired a third. But we all know that at some point, like just hiring a second or third, there's not economies of scale, and all of a sudden you got guaranteed payroll. Like, how much extra money are you really earning at the end of the day? May not be as much as doubling how much money you were taking home as a single practice owner. And they're in this bucket where their only mantra ever was like, I want to make my living. And yeah, I got a little bit bigger and I have enough space. Like, I put in a second person, and now I'm making my living plus a little bit without, again, thinking about all the what ifs. They don't show up for 5 days and all the fun stuff that goes along with another human in your practice. It's liability more than anything. But then there's the other bucket of, I want to build a business that gives me passive income. And maybe that passive income isn't as much as I'm working full time, 60 hours a week. But let's just say it's a quarter of that. And I now have that income. I could go, and maybe I'm still working and I'm hedged my bet, I'm still working, but I can now go invest that income or do that 4 times. And now I've got 4 pathways of passive income coming in. That means if I really want to go live in Connecticut 3 months a year and see my family and not draw an income at all because I'm not practicing physical therapy back when I'm in Florida, I could do that without even like thinking twice about that. In fact, I could do that and get the Airbnb up there, or maybe even have a second house that I rent out in the other months I'm not there. But I think the two buckets are the therapists looking at this as an actual business that, I think you said somewhere, like it's a business that happens to be healthcare kind of thing. Like, are they looking at this as a business, or is this I just prefer to work for myself, sole proprietorship kind of thing, and I'm making either the same, less, or a little more than if I worked for someone else, but I'm not dealing with the bureaucracy and the personalities that I may not like and the choice on who I'm hiring. So maybe those buckets, going back to the cash flow and everything, comes down to, are they thinking about their business as just, I just need to pay myself and maybe have a PTA or another PTA pay part-time. Maybe their thought process of how much cash they need in the bank is different than like me, who's thinking like, if I have money to leverage, I want to have that opportunity to leverage that. I want to have the opportunity to go, I'm not going to take your finance deal, I'm going to buy it. Or you know what? You're in distress and I could leverage that distress and I could get your business for pennies on the dollar, because I don't need to go get a line of credit, and I could just literally bake that into my flow, get rid of your front desk staff, bake that into mine. I chopped out, now I know I can get your profit margin up. So maybe it's not a matter of like one person's thinking right and one person's thinking wrong, but maybe it's a difference between someone who's only cooking bread that they're going to essentially eat versus trying to create a bakery.
Well, the uncomfortable truth, and obviously tell me if you disagree with this, but the uncomfortable truth is that the average practice owner doesn't actually have a business. The average practice owner has essentially created themselves a job that they can't really get out of. And before somebody gets pissed off and turns this thing off and and gets hates me forever, if you can't take a break, if you can't actually walk away from the business for 30 days and like dump your laptop in the ocean, you don't have a business. You have a job that you've created. Now, I say that not to piss people off, but to actually get them over to what you're saying, which is like there. So I don't like the term passive income, because the reality is that it sort of implies
I've actually yelled at people even for using it.
It's like, if I could find mailbox money like that, I would do that all day. But the reality is that like
you're not getting paid for face-to-face time on an hourly basis.
Right. And so like the thing is, when you think about it, just in broad strokes, and I know we're getting a little philosophical here, but maybe this will jar somebody listening into like actually, picking their business up and making it a real business, is like, today in 2024, there's only 4 forms of leverage. So if whatever it is you want, whether it's living 3 months in Maine or earning $50 million a quarter, or going to get ice cream with your kids every day at 4 p.m., whatever you want, the only way to get there is through 4 forms of leverage. Now, leverage. So not your own time, because you can't do that if you want those things that I just said. You and I can't work 37 million hours a day and make 50 million a quarter, right? So the 4 forms of leverage in 2024 are capital, labor, code, and media. Now, a couple of those are not relevant to this industry, but just to kind of call them out, like media, you know, you could be a big influencer like Kim Kardashian. That's what media leverage is. Code leverage is software, right? Well, that doesn't really apply here, at least as a practice owner. But money and labor are the 2 forms that could be leveraged to get to these kind of things. And just in broad strokes, capital could be, to your point, to kind of one of the examples you talked about, is like, hey, let's go get those lines of credit. Let's get them papered up during the good years, so that not only we cover our own butts if something goes sideways, but so that we have a war chest to pick off the distressed practices at the best time, right? Or labor leverage might be, okay, nobody makes any money off of 1 or 2 employees that are practicing. You've got to have 10, 20, 30, and the scale, the economies of scale sort of have to kick in there. So I know I'm kind of rambling here, but the point is, though, is that I think the uncomfortable truth is that the average practice owner today doesn't actually have a business. They've created a job for themselves that they can't actually walk away from, that actually has very little inherent value if something were to happen to them.
And I don't want to pick on physical, because I think because this is probably listened to by physical therapists and rehab therapists, that they're going to feel like we're picking on them. A, we're not. Period. But B, I want to say that this is no different than a physician, podiatrist, anyone who's I was talking to a podiatrist the other day, and I think he was a little upset. I used the term like retail. I kept using the term retail, not meaning because we're in strip malls or whatever, but retail meaning I make money when I'm face to face with a consumer, and that consumer pays me for a transaction, which means I'm limited to making money at a certain hours of the day. I can't make money at 2 a.m. I can't make up time at 3 a.m. and I get back late. I'm gonna make up time. No, it's a retail business. Not everyone wants to come on Saturday, or vice versa. Everyone wants to come in on Saturday, or everyone wants 5 to 7 o'clock. It's not that I can say I'm going to make money from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I might have these swells where I make a bigger chunk of change. It's retail. And the bottom line is, if you've created yourself a retail business where you are the front and center earner of that retail business, the question is that a business? I think is what you're saying. And to your point, the reason I've been entrepreneurial for a long time, but the reason why I kind of like was somewhere 5 or 6 years into practice, I was like, I hadn't taken a vacation more than probably 48 hours at that point, that I didn't dovetail onto like a long weekend, like a Memorial Day weekend, because I couldn't afford it. My bosses would be upset if I stopped generating income for them for that length of period of time, because it wasn't like 8 therapists working somewhere, it was maybe 2. I didn't take a week. Well, I still probably haven't. I don't know if I've ever taken a full week off, but that's just because I'm crazy and I work a lot. But I could right now. I could take several weeks off right now if I wanted to. I could take a month off, or 2 months off, or 3 months off if I wanted to. I don't want to, but the difference is I could. And I think the difference was somewhere around 5 years into practice, I said, I want to do something where I have a business or businesses that are generating income that are not retail based, meaning it's not this face-to-face hour thing that I'm totally stuck on, where it could be generating revenue overnight, it could be generating revenue whether I'm there or not. And I'm willing to put in that time now because I could hedge that bet. I've got income coming in as a therapist. I can now say, look, this even full circle is kind of what we were saying before, which is, once I know I have the amount of income to cover my bills, I can now take risk and I can now do stuff because I'm not worried about that. Just like a business, if you had a year, if you've got your year, you can sleep all at night and go, now what else can I do? Because I know I can screw up and fail because I've got a year's worth of coverage. So I could go now do stuff and hedge my bets and take risks and take other people's misfortune and capitalize on it, make smart calculated moves, use capital. But I think a majority of therapists who are solely operating are doing themselves, they're getting a living that's probably slightly better than if they were hired somewhere else, but with a ton of headache. A ton of what ifs. The water main bursts outside your place and you're out of business for a week. It bursts inside your place and you're out of business for 2 months? How much is insurance really going to cover? Do your therapy staff get covered? Do they walk? Um, it's a lot, and it's a lot where it's like the saddest part though is at the end of the day, then they go, I think like, what's my exit strategy? I'm getting tired. I'm getting retired. What happens? And then it's like someone like me, they call and I go, your place is of almost no value. Like there is not even a one-time EBITDA of your place, because if I just open up shop next door because I talk to your landlord and there's no
You could crush it. Yeah.
There's no such thing as legacy contracts anymore. So I will go get on all the panels that you're on at the same rate you're getting paid because you're getting squeezed every year. Newer equipment that's, I could go finance at zero payment for 4 years, whatever. Like what am I getting by taking over your space? The name on your banner? How much marketing and advertisement and brand awareness do you have? So it's like, yes, they created themselves a job, but just like a job and not a business, when you retire, your job is gone and your income's gone. And when you retire from a job that's not a business, it's also gone. The income that it was generating is also gone.
Yeah. It's like when we kind of like talk about this overall topic of like, how do you mitigate against um, this sort of risk again, with this, the next change or the, whatever. It's like, I think it really just comes back to, at some point, you got to be very honest with yourself, at least, about what could be fatal to your business. It could be the changes of the world. It could be the water pipe bursting. It could be a hurricane. Like the thing is I guess where I'm going with this is it sort of confirms the fact, just listening to you talk about it, confirms the fact that it's really the same as every other industry. Like once a quarter or so, you should probably have a conversation with yourself. Maybe it's a Google spreadsheet or something. It doesn't have to look pretty. And it's a disaster planning scenario. And it's everything that could possibly happen that could interrupt your day-to-day operations.
Like I said, I thought it was such a waste. Like I hate the licensure that I have to have and think some of the stuff's a waste, like what's my rodent control policy? But honestly, doing some of those tabletop exercises, because you run out of topics pretty quickly, you start going like, some of it's like doomsday-ish, where it's like I said on one of my things, we're talking, because we have to do it as a group, and we're talking, I'm like, if this were to happen, like we have much bigger problems than worrying about whether our business comes online. When someone's like, what if there's a massive, electromagnetic bomb and the internet is out for 300 days? And I'm like, if there's a massive electromagnetic pulse thing going on, we have much bigger, apocalyptic problems that I'm no longer worrying about. Am I going to be able to make payroll? I'm worrying about, is my family going to eat in 3 months?
This is fascinating, by the way. Okay, so this is probably a little TMI, but okay. So first of all, in the context of Strata, we actually do this. We actually have a Google spreadsheet, and every quarter it gets updated. If we think of something in the middle, somebody will just add it to the list. But at least once a quarter during the quarterly planning, we'll spend 10, 20 minutes just looking at it real quick to make sure that it's still up to date. But I started this not at Strata. I started this like almost 20 years ago with my first business, my data centers that we still operate. And and just as a little bit of inside baseball in case it maybe jogs some ideas for you, way back then, so I'm based in the DC suburbs. So that's home for me. That's where I'm at today. I just happen to grow up here, and I just want our kids to be close to, both sets of parents and all that. So years ago, when I first did this scenario, one of my clients had actually, at the time, had asked me like, okay, what's your disaster planning, whatever. And I, gave him our disaster planning or recovery document. He's like, no, that's the PDF. That's like the outcome of it. Where is the working document of all the things that could go wrong and how you're classifying them? And I was like, I don't have that. And he's like, well, and this was a very large Fortune 500 company. And they were like, well, look, we can't do business with you unless we understand what you believe could be possible risks. And anyway, long and short of it is, like, I really wanted that business. So I, because of this area and all the government, contractors that are here, I quickly put together like a little, back then you used like Monster and stuff like that to put out like contract offers and stuff. So I quickly wrote this offer, this online post where I was like, hey, I need a disaster planning workshop 3 days at my facility, and I need somebody to come facilitate it. The point of this is that I got this like retired Army guy. Like he wasn't a general. He was like one level, shy of that. He was retired and all that. anyway, he was a logistics command guy or whatever. So anyway, he came in, and I'll never forget, like, we had a 3-day thing. I ended up having to pay him like 40 grand for these 3 days. It's like, what in the world, but I needed this to get that client. Anyway, he comes in, he kicks off this thing. And he's like, here's what the next 72 hours look like for you. But I'll never forget. He's like, okay, but first let's talk about ground rules. And I'll never forget it. He said, I want you to understand, for the next 72 hours, nothing is impossible. Nothing is stupid. Nothing is ridiculous. And if any of you do that, you leave. And I like raised my hand. I was like, sir, I don't understand. I don't, because he was like angry the way he said it. And I was like, I don't understand. And he's like, he said something like, look, disaster planning is about not what could happen, but what might happen. And it cannot be like, we cannot allow anybody, like, we're all humans. He was like, we're all humans in this room. And if your inner voice feels like even one other person's going to laugh at the idea, you're not going to talk about it. And so, like, anyway, it's just very fascinating the way he talked about it. He's like, look, nothing is stupid, nothing's crazy, nothing's impossible. Nobody makes fun of anybody, or you leave. And it stuck with me for like the last 20 years. Like, we global pandemic, and I actually have timestamped documents on this. So I'm not making this up with the beauty of hindsight. Like, we didn't have global pandemic ranked very high, but we did have like a version of it that was like norovirus. Like our data centers operate with teams that have to be locked into the facility if something goes wrong, right? You got to lock it down, and you got to go off grid, inside air only, that sort of thing. But one of the contingencies that you have to be prepared for is what if one of the dudes inside there has a stomach bug? And what happens if like that spreads, because you have to be prepared for a 30-day lockdown inside the facility, but like it didn't say coronavirus in 2003, sure, but it did, we did talk about like, okay, what do we do for, separation? And then ultimately the outcome of that, when we realized that could be a fatal shutdown for the business if the data centers couldn't operate, we actually had to then re-architect the interiors of the buildings and separate out the teams. So, at any given time, there might be, 50 people in each building, but they're separated into 4 different facilities that are, separated by 40 or 50,000 square feet in distance between them. So anyway, it's just a very and so I don't know that every PT has to do this, but you got to do something.
You got to think though, in your downtime, if the PT has downtime, and anyone's been in practice and owned a place for at least 10 years, they have gone through I walked in and there's a minor flood, the toilet overflowed, or the washer hose blew. I walked in and our phones are not working today. I walked in and our internet's not working today. I walked in and half of the power of the building's not on today. And to go through and actually create what is the actual contingency plan for all that is not a bad idea. To actually have a manually open up so that you're in the moment, you're like, power outage, here's what we do. Here's the numbers I call, here's what we do. Do we call the patients and reschedule them, whatever it is? It depends on the weather. If the weather's nice, maybe we just open the front and the back door and we let them in anyway. Like, not to the level that you have to go through of like, do we isolate them and do we kill them or do we maim them? Not to the level of like population. What do we do when the person has bleeding eyes and they're in our facility? But to the level of, all this is talking about cash flow contingency, but I think we somehow spun into just overall contingency and overall tabletop exercises and disaster planning. It's like I said, we're forced to with certain licensures. I know the average therapist on the street, like a healthcare clinic's not forced to go through those things. But it's probably not a bad exercise for anyone to go through to that level. Like, the what if a meteor fell through the sky and went through the roof and whatever, like, maybe you don't get to that this year, but maybe in 3 years, since you run out of stuff too, maybe you do. Maybe you do get.
Well, exactly. Yeah,
a front window. Like, right. What do you do?
Yeah, you want to mitigate. Yeah, if you're listening to this and if you can get past like the doomsday prepper vibe for a second, the reality is the vast majority of the things that are likely to happen are actually can actually be mitigated with very small amounts of effort and money. Like, I'll just give you an example with Strata, just one example, because it might be related, might be similar to like what a practice owner might face. Our team, I think we're 34 people now, and about 30 of us operate fully remote. Well, that's because of software. We can be anywhere. But the other 4 or 5 actually operate from a office we have in Florida, just because that's where we started. Because there's certain things that have to be done in the office, whether it's printing out the final set of claims, or, there's things that you just need because of the way HIPAA and all that works and all that. Well, because it's in Florida, there's risk of hurricanes and all that stuff. And just one example of how you mitigate it. Well, once you realize, like, hey, hurricanes are going to happen every year, that there's no way around it. And we don't really want to move the office to like Wisconsin. I mean, like that, nothing wrong with Wisconsin, but like we don't have, well, it just so happens that the office is now on the 2nd floor of a building. Okay, well, now we don't have to worry about floods as much. Okay, well, what's left? You still got to think about power. Okay, well, the switch room actually has all the power going into one block. If things were really crazy, we can bring a generator in there and plug it in. And that's happened, where we've actually had to bring a generator in. Internet could go down. Well, if internet goes down, now I got 5 people there that, may not be able to operate from home, because the whole point of that, well, for $300, we can get a router that has 2 internet connections, and it automatically switches between. Come on, like the point is that like, you don't have to plan for every coronavirus or every change healthcare, but if you can like at least start to write down what could hurt your income, I think that'd go a long way.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Strata Stories. Strata is a single EMR platform and revenue cycle management service for physical, occupational, and speech therapy practices that helps you achieve a 99.99% reimbursement rate. If you'd like to learn more about Strata and see how our EMR and RCM works, head over to StrataPT.com to book a demo.